Now, when we read in the story here, the vacuum law of prosperity, I talk about my Aunt Marg. And she's gone now, God bless her, and so is her husband, Don. But I asked her one time, I said, her life changed so dramatically from the seminars. And I said, Marg, what's the greatest thing you learned? Oh, she said, there's no question about it. The vacuum law. That's all she referred to, the vacuum law. She says, that was the greatest thing. She says, everything in my life changed when I started to understand that. And it's pretty simple. Look, right here on my desk, I have sitting this little hourglass. Well, you know, I can't put anything where that hourglass is until I get rid of it. And we find that we want things to come into our life, but we don't create room for them. Nature abhors a vacuum. Well, Mark started to learn that. Now, what happened, she was, as I mentioned in the book, she was more like a sister or a cousin than an aunt. She was my dad's youngest sister, and she was very close to my age. She was only very few years older than me. And so we were more friends like cousins or brother and sister. And I would go to their house often, and they had a whole house full of kids. And they, by most people's standards, you would say they were very poor. They had a difficult time getting along because they just didn't have the money. And Don worked in a factory. He was a millwright, so he would fix anything in the factory that broke, and he was very good at that. But the factory was way on the other side of the city, and they did not have a car, so he had to take public transportation all the way out there, and then he would work overtime every day, every night, to earn enough money to get by. Well, I would drop by and see them periodically, and I went in there one time. It was near Christmas. And they were running all over the place trying to get credit cards from the big stores to buy presents for the kids because they didn't have any money. And I remember sitting watching this, and Don said, never mind, next year will be different. And I said, you know something, Don? Next year is going to be exactly the same as this year because you've never changed you. And every year you say next year is going to be different, but it's never different. See, I said next year was going to be different at one time, and that's when I picked up this book, and next year, every year has been different. So I was sort of on a mission of changing people's lives, and the ones I loved, I would really go after them. And I said, you never change you. So how do you expect your life to change? Now, he would work, as I said, overtime. He would get paid every 2 weeks. That meant that 3 or 4 times a year, they would get 3 pays in a month. And I remember figuring that out for this situation. I never knew, really had any reason to think of it before. But if they get paid every 2 weeks, every 3 or 4 times a year, they would have 3 pays in a month. They had a budget, and they had to have a budget because they didn't have any money. So they had to watch what they were buying all the time. And the budget was made on 2 pays a month. So every now and then, there would be an extra pay. That wasn't in the budget. There was something, here's, party time. And so anyway, I was doing these seminars in downtown Toronto, and I said, why don't you go to the seminar? Well, no. Anyway, Mark got him to go. So he and his wife, Mark, they come down the seminar. Now it cost them their whole pay, this whole extra pay. And I took every cent of it. And I took it for a reason. I knew that if they didn't pay, they wouldn't keep going. It was run over 8 weeks, 2.5 hours a week for 8 weeks. It was every Tuesday or every Thursday, I forgot now, at the Hyatt Hotel in downtown Toronto. And the first 2 or 3 weeks, I don't even think they knew what we were talking about. Marg told me later, she said, if we hadn't have paid so much money to come to this, I would have quit. I would have quit coming. Because I didn't understand hardly anything you were talking about. But then you came to the point where you talk about goals. And you said, what do you want? Not what do you think somebody else wants you to want, what do you really want? And she said, you know, it had been a long time since I thought of what I wanted. I was always thinking, what does Don want? What do the kids want? And she said, when I took my pen and went to write down what I wanted, she said, I couldn't think of anything. But she said, you kept insisting it's got to be what you want. And she said, when the things started to come to my mind, she said, I couldn't stop them. And she said, I filled up pages with what I wanted. And her whole life changed. And then she started to understand this. But anyway, after they went and started in the seminars, I dropped by every now and then. And I remember we were sitting in the living room having a cup of coffee and just visiting. And she said, do you mind if we go and sit in the kitchen? And I said, not at all. So I asked her, I said, why do you want to sit in the kitchen rather than here? She said, I can't stand that room. I just hate living in that, sitting in that room. She says, I hate those curtains that are on the window, on the dining room window, the drapes on the front window. And I said, no, you don't hate those, Mark. I said, you only have attract things to you that you love, that you're in harmony with. I said, if you really didn't love them, you get rid of them. But she said, I'm going to put them there if I get rid of them. I said, Mark, if you had something to put there, you couldn't put it there because you've already got something there. And I said, that's when I started to teach her the law of vacuum law prosperity. So anyway, she went and got a chair and got up and stood on it. She started to take all these curtains down. Well, Don, he was roaring like a stuffed pig. He said, what are you doing? And she said, I'm getting rid of these. And she did. Wasn't too long after I dropped in, all the furniture in the living room was gone. It was like they were just moving into the place. But then they got new curtains, and then they got new furniture. And you know, everything in that house changed. Wasn't too long they were in business for themselves. They're both gone now. But when they left, they were fairly well off. They had a beautiful place in Florida they'd go to in winter. The family still runs their own business. I mean, it was such a beautiful thing to see. And it was all, and I tell the story in here because it was all about the vacuum law of prosperity. Well, what have you got in your life that you don't want? Or that you don't like? Or what is it that you've got that you really want to get rid of? You've got to get rid of this stuff. Get rid of it. Give it away. See, nature truly does abhor a vacuum. When you make space for the good that you desire, that's when the good's going to come. Most people don't make the space for the good that they desire. This particular law is probably one of the most valuable things you can learn. I was talking to Tommy, we're going to break into groups. I hope you've all got this with you. And in the groups, I want you to talk about this. I want you to talk about how you can apply this law in your life, how you can use it to create space for greater good in your life. If you don't create the space for it, you're not going to get it. You're dealing with universal laws. These are not man-made, so they're not going to be changed by man.
You may already know or found a way to navigate to those points of twinkling light, casting the darkness out of his life. Because even a Jedi Master can have a bad day. Haven't you wondered how Bob became Bob?
I hope you enjoyed this video. We put a lot of good information up here, and it causes everything in your life to get better. If you'd like us to notify you every time we put a new video up, hit subscribe and then turn on notifications. Check out all our videos, and we will notify you when we put a new one up.